Guys, today we are going to kick it off with arguably the biggest game of the weekend in Columbus, Ohio. Big noon kickoff. Ohio State, Indiana, top five matchup. Buckeyes favored by 13 and a half points against a top five team. Tells you everything you need to know about that top five ranking there. 13 and a half points, Buckeyes over under 51 and a half. Freddie, go ahead and tell us what we got for Chase's prediction for this week.
Yeah, so Chase is actually traveling this week, so that's the reason why he's not with us. So safe travels to you, big man. We'll see you next week. Um, Chase has Ohio State winning, and his explanation is he just thinks that Ohio State's too strong, that Indiana gets exposed with a score prediction of 31-17. So kind of right around that spread number there for Chase. Now for me, I am in an agreement with Chase here. I think Indiana gets exposed. I don't listen. It's one thing to be undefeated, right? It's another thing to have the 106th strength of schedule in the country. This sort of reminds me of the Liberty situation last year, whenever they made it to the New Year's Six game as the Group of Five representative. They were undefeated, but they had the worst strength of schedule in the country. They got severely exposed. Now, I do want to point out that if you watch Indiana play, they look like a good football team, right? Like it's not like it's not, to be honest, it's not like they're BYU struggling their way through some games against far inferior opponents. They're playing good football, so you can't really fault them there. My issue is that they haven't been tested really this year. Ohio State has, right? A 1 point loss, I believe it was, to Oregon on the road. They beat Penn State at Penn State. So, like, they've played in some hostile environments. They are battle tested this year. That's one thing that Indiana is not. So give me Ohio State to win this game. I don't think they cover the 13 and a half, though. I think this spread is indicative of what we've seen from Indiana, right? Like, we don't know who they are. We don't really know, like, they haven't played really anybody, which is no fault of their own, right? It's not their fault that Michigan sucks this year, right? Like, it's not their fault that Washington sucks. It's not their fault that Nebraska is not what, people wanted them to be. So don't get me wrong in saying that. But I think you have to take that into consideration when you look at Indiana as a whole. So I think Ohio State wins, but I think Indiana covers the spread. It could be a back end cover, late touchdown to kick it to 10 points, something of that nature. But I don't think there's really any scare for Ohio State to lose this game.
Yeah, you bring up that it reminds you of Liberty last year. I think what it reminds me of is when number one Mississippi State came into Tuscaloosa in 2014 in a top four matchup. It was their first major road test of that season. Their other big win on their cap was LSU at home. And outside of that, the SEC was relatively down in 2014. They'd go on to lose to Ole Miss later that year too, which was one of the better teams in the conference. But that's kind of the vibe I'm getting of this game. And it's like you said, it's no fault of their own that their schedule is downhill. Like you said, Washington and Michigan were in the national title game last year. That makes picture wise looks like it's going to be good. Now, everyone who kind of kept up with the offseason knew that there was a chance those games wouldn't be as good as you thought they were just based on logos. And as far as Nebraska, you got exactly what you expected out of them. So I don't know why you bring that one up as like a team who's
That was an
shocking that
omen to
they're
chase there.
below 500. But you know, Indiana, this game's going to go one of two ways, and it all depends on what happens in the first quarter. So let me paint you a picture because it's going to be a rough environment. Okay, Ohio State comes out in the first quarter and they jump on Indiana right off the bat. Game's over. It's over. Ohio State's going to cover the spread. They're probably going to win by about 17 to 24 points. I know Indiana has looked great all year. I'm not saying that to discredit the team. I think the Indiana team is more talented than a 13 and a half point spread. I say that given the fact that Ohio State has not had a good home game to get excited about all season. So that stadium's going to be insane. I just don't know if they overcome it. Now, on the other hand, I think there's a world we live in, and I think this is probably the more probable outcome, and it's going to be my prediction for the game, is that Indiana comes out hot, maybe scores the first 7 to 10 points of the ball game, and then the crowd noise and the depth of talent and the experience in big games of Ohio State, along with their defense being able to limit Indiana's ability to ball control offensively, will slowly eat away at Indiana. And by the end of the game, we're looking up at a scoreboard that Ohio State pulls away, 31-27 or something of that nature. Like, I think that's what we're looking at long term for this game, is a close game. I don't think that Ohio State's going to cover the spread. Because of that, I think Indiana's going to be a playoff team. Um, one loss, jump out early on Ohio State and barely lose, they're going to get in. I know there's some people out there in SEC country rooting for an absolute blowout, but I don't see it coming. So give me Ohio State to win the game. Give me Indiana to cover in what I think is going to be a highly competitive football game in Columbus this weekend.
I do want to mention, so you brought up how this game could start. Ohio State's notorious this year for starting off slow in every single game.
Yep.
Every one of them. Whether it's Purdue, which they ended up winning 45-0, that I think that game was only 14-0 or maybe even like 10-0, something of that nature in the first quarter. So like it wasn't a complete blowout. Nebraska was a close game. And then obviously Northwestern as well. Like that game was pretty tight early. So I could definitely see that in this game as well. And if that's the case, then we could be looking at a close game, but I think it's going to go just like every other game that Ohio State's played and started slow in.
Yep. And like I said, I think that's probably what you're looking at long term, is Ohio State pulls away late. But guys, make sure you tell us down in the comments below how you think this is going to go. Tell us if we're smart, stupid, why you think that. We love to hear back from everybody. Give us a follow, share this with people who like college football, and remember, we are sponsored by SeatGeek. You get $20 off your first purchase with the code 3BoldTakes at SeatGeek. Guys, we're out.